morning, Ms. Bird.
Good morning.
Welcome, and I see that you have guests with you today. Would you like to introduce your guests?
I would. I have brought with me my husband, Bob, and our son, Beckett. He helps me out sometimes by attending meetings and being good, and I think he's going to do that today.
Well, wonderful. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
When you're ready, you may begin with your opening statement.
Thank you. Let me start with this. First, good morning. I have enjoyed meeting with each of you throughout this process. Thanks for taking the time to do that. Thank you for the dedication that you approach your job here with. I think people forget sometimes you're volunteers with a lot going on in the rest of your life. So thank you for the time that you have shown me, the consideration, the work you put into this process. I appreciate it. I'm here today because I would like to serve, and I'm going to talk about who I am as a person, my professional life, and my vision for the court. Well, in some ways, I'm a pretty traditional Iowan, but on a non-traditional path. I have not always wanted to be a justice. In fact, growing up, there were no lawyers in my family, just farmers. I was born and raised on a farm near Dexter. My dad was a corn and beans farmer, and we helped him with that. Also had a farrow-to-finish operation and raised cattle. At the time, I was in 4-H. I had goats that I raised. I had chickens. I learned a lot working on the farm and helping my family out. Most importantly, I picked up that work ethic that you pick up living on the farm. I did everything farm kids do, from walking beans to cutting thistles out of CRP. And if you don't know what that is, wait until it's a hot day in August and I'll show you. I worked my way through college at Drake University. I worked full-time, more than 40 hours a week to pay for school. I paid my own way. I waited tables. I cleaned houses and businesses. I worked in the legislature, and I also worked on local campaigns. I graduated after 3 years full-time and 1 semester part-time. Then I wanted to go to law school, and I'm glad I got the chance to go to law school. I ended up going to the University of Chicago. There, I picked that school because it was difficult, and I'm glad I did that as well. It was a challenging environment. I learned a lot. Let me say up front, everybody there was smarter than me, and that was very good for me. I enjoyed it. I had one experience there that stands out in my mind that I'd like you to know about. It was during orientation. I had just started school. They had a couple days of orientation for law students. And one of the orientation sessions at the very end of the day was about financial aid. And anybody who had financial aid had to stay and listen to the session. It was mandatory. And so the person at the front of the room announced, and this was an expensive school, I had some loans that I was taking out to pay for it, that anybody who didn't have financial aid could just get up and leave, and they could come back the next day. And to my surprise, half of the people around me got up and walked out of the room. I was surprised. I couldn't believe it, and at that moment it occurred to me, the Porsches and Beamers that I saw in the parking lot, that was the student parking lot, not the faculty parking lot. I also realized something else, that a farm girl from Iowa has the same access to opportunities as everybody else, and I was very grateful for that. I also knew that I had a secret weapon, the farm girl work ethic, and I bet many of those people didn't have access to that. I'm non-traditional in my personal life as well. I didn't get married until I was 38. My husband, Bob, and I have a son, Kit. He's 3.5. His full name is Beckett. He's a farm boy at heart. We live on the farm near Dexter, Iowa, in the house that my grandpa built. Bob's a lawyer too, and we juggle our busy professional lives and our parenting lives in order to make everything work. And I can't take the credit for that. It's a team effort. Someone I respect told me once, the harder you work, the luckier you get. And that's held true for my legal career. I've been lucky to have a broad experience as a lawyer, both in terms of practice areas and practice settings. I've worked at a big national law firm, both in Washington, D.C. and Silicon Valley, California. I've been a corporate lawyer. I've been a litigator. I've worked at Iowa firms. I now today have my own solo practice. I serve as county attorney in Guthrie County. I've also served in Fremont County. In the government, I've served at the state, federal, and local levels in the executive and legislative branch. That breadth of experience is a strength. Now, working in the governor's office, for example, government legal practice, well, it's like county seat practice. You take what comes in the door. And so the subject matter there certainly would vary widely, from employment law to administrative rules, civil advice, drafting advice, legislation, constitutional issues that come to the governor's office. They were never the easy issues. The easy issues had been taken care of before they would get to me. We got the tough ones. Now, let's go back to the end of 2014. I'd had a chance to do a lot of things that I enjoyed in my career, but one thing I'd never done that I'd always wanted to do was to try cases. So I kind of did it backwards. I did it the hard way. I set out to change the fact that I hadn't tried a case. And the first thing I did was start my own law firm. I realized a lot of opportunities to try cases were in criminal law. I tried to get hired as a part-time assistant county attorney in order to get that experience, but I couldn't get hired. And so when I heard that Fremont County was looking for a county attorney, that's the furthest southwest county in Iowa. If you hit Nebraska or Missouri, you've gone too far. Come on back to Fremont County, and that's where I worked. The Board of Supervisors had faith in me and hired me as their county attorney. Now, I was the only attorney in that office. I worked hard. I got up to speed. I tried cases. There in Fremont County, I had 6 jury trials over the course of that time. I prepared for probably 3 to 4 times as many trials as cases I actually got to try. Now, I worked hard, but I must be honest, I had the support of others for advice. I called for advice quite a bit. I did my homework, and I prepared. Before every trial, I would tell myself, I put the try in trial. Now, there's nothing like trial by fire, and the harder you work, the luckier you get. I'm going to talk a little bit about my vision for the court as well. I talked about this in my written application at length, but I believe in civility. I believe that civility doesn't mean that everyone agrees, but rather it does mean that everyone is respected and everybody has the chance to be your friend. It's something I believe in as a lawyer and a person, and the times when it's hardest to be civil or to have good manners, those are just the times that I need to do it most. I would also bring my grassroots approach to management to the court. I have government management experience. I think that would serve me well on the court, but one of the best ways to manage in a setting like that is to understand that we're managing volunteers in some ways and to heal some of the divides that exist, the divides between the 3 branches of government and the divides within the judicial branch. I would also bring my approach to the law to the court. That is one that is rooted in respect for the text of the law and the Constitution. The Supreme Court acts as the guardian of the Constitution and heads an entire branch of government that is essential to the checks and balances in our constitutional system. I'd also bring the diversity of my professional background, the different practice settings that I have had. I would bring my understanding of rural practice and smaller counties, my criminal law experience, and my juvenile experience. Right now, Justice Christensen is the only justice that I'm aware of that has the type of experience that I have in those 2 areas. I'd also bring the experience I have working in the other branches of government and other levels of government. I'd bring the frontline experience that I have working, for example, today as a county attorney. I understand addiction better than I ever wish I did. And in rural Iowa, we have a meth problem. We have a lot of problems, but the meth problem is really hurting rural Iowa. When I was in Fremont County, I had access to drug court. And in some of the interviews I had with some of you, I talked about the deep personal meaning that that has for people who get access to drug court and an opportunity to have a path to sobriety that can change their lives and their families' lives. Where I am in Guthrie County, we don't have that kind of access. So I have options that are imperfect and often fail. If I had access to a drug court program, we could have more people who do not go to prison, more people who can get their kids back, parent their children, stay out of trouble, and live a fulfilling, good life contributing to society. on the Supreme Court, I would be able to advocate for those programs and understand how that affects people firsthand. In closing, I'd like to serve. I thank you, and I hope you will consider me for nomination to the governor.
Thank you. And we would like to take a few minutes to ask some questions from the commission. And so I will begin with Ms. Stanger.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for your application and for being here today. One of the things you stated in your comments was your observation about access to opportunities when you were at law school, right? And that anyone can take a run at it. One of the comments in a judicial oath is that judges swear to provide equal justice under the law. With that concept and your experience for equal opportunities, could you comment to the court or to the commission how you would ensure access for everyone under the law?
Well, I think that breaks down into at least two categories. One is access to justice as a matter of justice itself, and that's treating everyone fairly and impartially, whether they are rich or poor. I think that's important. But also, we have the access to justice and making sure that people have access to justice regardless of their personal circumstances. And that is something that I understand in the trenches and on the front lines, that many of the people who come to the courthouse in Guthrie Center, for example, yesterday, when I had court service, they don't have driver's licenses, some of them. Some of them don't have access to a vehicle that is insured and properly registered. Others don't have money for gas, or they have such turmoil in their personal life, it's hard for them to know where they're going to be living at a particular point in time and to arrange for a ride. So I see those kinds of problems, and we have to be aware of how the justice system impacts all Iowans, and that particularly impacts those who don't have the resources like others do. That's something I will always be mindful of. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pearson?
No question.
Mr. Gray?
Thank you. Ms. Bird, when we met and also on your application, you've disclosed that you're currently a defendant in a case that is pending before the Iowa Supreme Court. Can you tell us about that and why, if that should be a concern of ours in looking at your application?
Sure. So I said in my application I would certainly recuse myself from that case and any other case that I have involvement with as a justice. Because that case is still pending, I don't comment on the nature of that case or otherwise try to argue it in the court of public opinion. But one thing I do want you to know, that as much as I certainly don't like being sued, no one does, no one would look forward to that, it has been valuable to me as a person. It's not a lesson that I would seek out, but it's one that sought me out. And having my name after the V certainly helps me understand more. It makes me a better lawyer. I think it makes me a better person. It makes me more empathetic. And so that experience, although not always an easy one, people who serve in public office are sometimes sued. It's not an easy one. It is one that has taught me some valuable lessons. I think empathy is the word that I would use there when understanding the legal system. It makes it adds to my understanding when I'm prepping a witness for trial. It is a constant reminder as I look over and we're waiting for a verdict to come in, and I can see the look on a criminal defendant's face as they're waiting to hear what their fate is. It's very real, and I appreciate the things that I've learned from that experience.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hoytick?
I would like to build off that a little bit as well. I had the experience of representing clients in practice as a private attorney, and then went in-house and found out that advising people and helping make decisions is a beast of a different animal than having people come to you after something has happened. And I've also had my name on the side of a V as well. How do you think that would impact or inform you as a Supreme Court justice, having that experience of having to actually had to perhaps sit in on a decision that might become the subject of a lawsuit at some point, or really make hard calls in the face of things that you're not sure how they're going to play out? How would that inform your decision making and the way you look at a case?
Well, I think that experience for me has been very personally valuable to my approach to the law and my understanding of the law. First of all, the most important thing there is that as people read decisions from courts, oftentimes we are trying to find out what we should do. It informs people's conduct. Most people want to comply with the law and want to understand what's required. Ambiguity makes that difficult and makes it hard for people to understand what's required when they're complying with the law. So it helps me to understand the importance of clarity in legal writing. I think that is important. Also, just understanding how to interpret statutes. I taught statutory interpretation as part of my legislation class at the University of Iowa. All of those aspects would help me on the court.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. O'Brien.
Thank you. Would you comment about, there's a way of describing your background as having included legislative experience and executive branch experience. And some people see that as a great way of having a breadth of experience, and other people see it as political and contending that the political process should not be affecting this process.
Yes, and I agree. I don't think the political process should be affecting this process, and I've observed the commission being very careful in that regard and doing your due diligence and sorting the wheat from the chaff. I would be fair-minded and independent if I were chosen. I believe that my experience in government is an asset. I can tell you that if I were on the court, there will be times when, even though I've been a county attorney, the county attorneys will not be pleased with a decision that I was part of, because it's not an advocacy position. It's interpreting the law. It's the guardian of the Constitution. That is very different. I can also tell you that at times the different political branches of government, such as the executive branch or the legislature, may not be happy as well, but that's not the role of a justice. My role is to interpret the law, to be a guardian of the Constitution, to take care of the institution of the judicial branch. That is very different.
Thank you. Mr. Horbach.
No question.
Mr. Spies.
Good morning, Ms. Byrd.
Good morning.
There is, of course, an adverse jury verdict that's still lingering in your professional life right now, and I understand and appreciate your reluctance to discuss that for all sorts of reasons. And nonetheless, it's a cloud that is kind of hanging over consideration of your application. Do you think it's premature for us to give you the fair hearing that you're entitled to until that cloud has been lifted?
Well, let me say this. I respect the jury system and the legal system in Iowa. That particular case is on appeal for the third time and has been going on since it began, I believe, in 2011 is when that case first started. So it's been going on for 9 years. And also in my current role, there are other times that I could be sued in my current capacity as county attorney. I'm a witness in one case related to my work in Fremont County. There will be other matters like that occur just by the very nature of my work in public service. And I've tried to be as transparent as I can about that particular case, offering commissioners could speak with the lawyers that are involved. Since it's on appeal and in this court, I just, as you understand, don't feel like it's appropriate for me to talk about it, and I would not have any involvement with the case if I were on the court.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Law.
No questions.
Mr. Bevel.
No questions.
Mr. Bloom.
Yeah, just sort of a high-level observation. Your application was one that was sort of hard to fit into my spreadsheet, and I was wondering why that was. Graduating from the University of Chicago Law School, that is the second highest ranked law school of any applicant I've seen in 8 years of doing commission work. So that's a tremendous accomplishment. I went to interview, I was at a large hay and forage factory on the staff down there at the time in 2001, but I went to an Ivy League school to recruit MBAs, and I can tell you at least at that school, they all wanted to go to Silicon Valley. I don't know if law is different, but I'm assuming that was a pretty competitive job you landed with Heller Airmen in Silicon Valley at that particular time. That had to be a top-notch blue ribbon job. And so you achieved that, and then I look at the other things you did. Chief of staff of a congressman, well-ran effort as a candidate for the Attorney General of Iowa, and be the one person in the state that a highly respected governor picked to be his legal counsel. And you did all of that before you were 35 years old. And then you decided to be a solo lawyer and a county attorney. If you'd have done that first and all the other stuff later, I think it all would have made sense to us. So I applaud what you've been doing the last 5 or 6 years and wanting to get that basic experience in your law practice and as a county attorney. So I just wanted to congratulate you on that hard decision to start over in a certain way.
Yeah, thank you. Well, if I had tried to be a county attorney right out of law school, I couldn't have paid my law school loans. So.
Well, thank you. And I'm sorry we're out of time today, but we appreciate you being here, and we certainly wish you well. Thank you for bringing your son and your husband.
Thank you.